Welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to serve in as moderator for today's discussion.
Great, Lisa, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And thank you for welcoming me so warmly into the RIBA community. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be surrounded by 4 extraordinary leaders in the Rhode Island community today. And without further ado, I'd like to invite them to introduce themselves and just allow you to tell us each a little bit about your background and what's brought you here today. The format will be a conversation, a moderated conversation for about the next 35 or 40 minutes, followed by questions. So please do feel free to submit your questions on the Q&A function or the chat function as they come to you. So Melissa, please could you kick things off for us?
Good evening. Thank you so much, Robin. I'm really excited to be here to be a part of this conversation. My name is Melissa Husband, obviously, and I am the Deputy Secretary of State here in Rhode Island for Secretary Nellie Gorbea. I oversee all of Secretary Gorbea's program divisions, which includes business services, elections, archives, public library, public information, which oversees lobbyists in the state. And I also oversee her financial, her finances and her human resources. And I'm essentially here to talk about the role of government when it comes to Black businesses in the state of Rhode Island and how our office has pushed forth many initiatives to support businesses in general, but specifically Black businesses in the state of Rhode Island.
Great, thanks so much. Anthony Rust, we'll turn it to you next, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony Rust, a 20-year resident of Rhode Island. I work for the Business Equity Fund. I'm the fund manager there, which is a ecosystem initiative that we started about 4 years ago in Massachusetts to help African-American and Latinx-owned businesses with really 3 primary functions. 1, to help them gain capital for growth. 2, to help them access strategic capacity or advisory services, more than just technical assistance, but real hands-on advisory services. And then the 3rd is access to contracts, both corporate and public contracts. And, you know, through this program, which I co-authored, we try and in a holistic way, help the businesses grow, focusing again on African-American and Latinx-owned businesses.
Thank you, Anthony.
Sure.
Angie Nkoma, please, could I invite you to introduce yourself next?
Thank you, Robin. Angie Bannerman Nkoma. I am the Vice President of Equity Leadership at the excuse me. I just recently changed jobs, if you haven't recognized that already. Used to work at the United Way of Rhode Island up until December, and now I'm at the Rhode Island Foundation as the Vice President of Equity Leadership, really looking at overseeing the $8.5 million investment the foundation made about 5 months ago now, and looking at investing from a racial equity lens. And so looking at training and developing an initiative to support the next generation of leaders of color in the state of Rhode Island, in addition to working internally with colleagues and looking at how do we do our work from a racial equity lens. And in my free time, I am also the owner of 2 small businesses in Providence, Rhode Island, and have been for a small decade, a men's clothing store and a barbershop in Providence, Copa Menswear.
Thank you for making time to join us today. And last but certainly not least, Anthony Roll.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Anthony Roll. I am the Dean of the Alan Sean Feinstein College of Education and Professional Studies at the University of Rhode Island, and I'm a professor of Education, Finance, and Economic Policy. We have 3 units at the university: our School of Education, our School of Professional and Continuing Studies, and our Office of Strategic Initiatives. I'm here today to talk about some of the education and professional development aspects that may be necessary to improve small business ownership, as well as to present somewhat of an antagonistic approach to some of the comments that are being made, just so we have full coverage of all the perspectives that are available. And I just want to remind folks, the questions that I ask may not be my actual perspective.
Wow. And the gauntlet has been thrown. Okay. So we're looking forward to some antagonizing questions from Anthony. The rest of us will be very conciliatory. So with that, Lisa, before we turn to some questions for the panelists, I wonder if you could help us set the stage for where we are for the Black business community in Rhode Island right now and where have we come from?
Yeah, Robin, that's a great jump off point. So, we're in the middle of what I consider two pandemics, right? So we're fighting COVID-19, but thank God the vaccine is here. And then in addition to that, we have been 400 plus years of slavery, right? That has certainly impacted the Black community. When I think of Rhode Island over the last 10 years that we've been doing this work, specifically around highlighting the challenges of Black businesses here in the state, specifically around access to capital, access to contracts, for them to be able to grow and scale and also create jobs. What we have seen across the state before I got here, but probably 10 years, as I started this journey with Reba, it has been pretty bad for Black businesses here in the state. What we have also seen very recently is a direct result of COVID-19, and we probably heard this number across the nation, about 41% of Black-owned businesses have closed their doors forever, right? Rhode Island, the last census data, we had about 3,364 Black-owned businesses here in the state. What's really, really sad, out of that 3,364, there's about 295 of those businesses with employees, right? So we all know that businesses, right, across the nation create more jobs. Small businesses create more jobs across the nation. And we know they can do that here in Rhode Island as well. What we also know, because the population is so small, only 295, right, are able to hire anyone. Hence, we have this really high unemployment rate within the Black community, right? When you think about Rhode Island, the numbers, I like to talk about the number that they put out there around the unemployment rate. It's going down, it's going down. But if you look at Ward 10, 11, right, in the urban core, the 5 urban cities here in the state, unemployment in some cases for Black and Brown are up to probably like 25, 30%, right? So we got to do a better job in investing in the scalability of Black businesses. We also know home ownership is very low for Blacks, right? And we know when folks own a home, they transition that home to another person, right? Generational wealth is passed on, right? And right now what we're seeing, I had a great conversation recently with Rhode Island Housing. There's an effort underway right now to help with home ownership in the state, right? When folks are doing well, Black companies create jobs, they hire Black people right within their own communities, right? It's a win-win across the board. So what I would say is $178 billion, right? It's coming into the state with this stimulus, whatever the president signed, whatever we call it, right? This money is coming in the state. And what I am afraid of, and I'm so afraid, I'm having a nightmare about this, that this money will arrive in Rhode Island and it's going to leave us behind. Because you know what? I've only been here 30 something years, right? And since I got here, the issue with the Black community has not changed. And people that's been here before me, my dear friend Melissa and I, we were walking the other day and we were talking about this, right? This issue has been around forever. So I'm hoping that this conversation here will lead to some really solutions, what we need to do to ensure that our community is not left behind, right? And that's where I want us to think about driving more from the solution standpoint rather than, talking about the issues that we all know so well.
Great, Lisa. Thank you for sharing that with us and for your candor and perspective on things. So I'd like to start the panel discussion with a question for Anthony Rhode. Could we start by focusing on the economic recovery in Rhode Island? Lisa has just mentioned that we're going to be beneficiaries of the American Recovery Plan. Where do Black businesses and families fit into this scenario?
Good evening, Robin. I don't, at this point, believe that we fit into any plan because there's not yet been a plan developed. If those dollars are coming from federal agencies to Rhode Island at the 1.7 approximately billion dollar space, there's going to be a long discussion, hard fought politics over who gets what amount and how those dollars are going to be used. In fact, I believe that a majority of those dollars are going to be used to plug up holes in our short-term and long-term state budgets. And as individuals and agencies have discussions and fight over the amount of dollars available, those with power and influence will receive the lion's share of those money first. Secondarily, those organizations that will have a large return on investment of the dollars will be next. And then small businesses, unfortunately, will be that third group to be able to go to the money and the revenues that are available there.
So that's useful and a little bit discouraging, but let's look at other drivers for economic recovery. Part of it's going to come from the federal government, but there's also going to be economic recovery that comes from growth and people getting out of their houses and beginning to engage with one another. How do we think about that? Anthony Rust, Anthony Roll, any others would like to chime in on that?
Well, I think I'd love to talk about really what Lisa started off talking about, which was, we need to develop strategies on how to make sure this $1.7 trillion flows to, our community or proportionally to our community. And I'll use a recent example, right? So there was a report that was put out by WGBH up in Boston, right? And it did a study. It said over a 5-year period, 2015 to 2019, the city of Boston put out $2.4 billion in contracts to vendors to procure products, goods, and services, right? That was 47,000 contracts that made up that $2.4 billion. And less than half of 1% went to Black businesses in the city, right? That's just unbelievable, right? So we need to make sure whatever we need to do, insist that whoever's allocating the funds, right, whether it's going to cities and towns, right, who are the ultimate allocators of a good portion of that money, right, that money flows to Black business. We have, in this country, Black folks have roughly $1.3 trillion of buying power, right? That's real power, okay? And we need to start using our power as consumers to insist that folks act in our best interest.
I see people nodding. Melissa, Angie, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I think that I absolutely agree with both Anthony's. I think, as Lisa stated, our Black business community, yes, indeed is small, but it is indeed very mighty. I think what we need to do is come together. I think so often in our communities, we attack some of these problems as individuals, and we really don't see the benefit. I think that what we need to do is to come together as a Black business community and talk about and create a strong agenda of what recovery actually looks like to you, and then demand that the money that's coming down from the federal government is used to implement this agenda. The 2022 election is right around the corner. We have to hold our electeds accountable. We have new leadership in the House. We have Senate leadership. We have the governors. We have our governor, mayors, and city council members. A lot of these seats are going to be up and coming. So this is the opportunity. This is the opportunity for our community to come together and create that agenda and put it on the table. Maybe even think about collectively hiring a lobbyist to do some of that back work that is necessary to kind of get that momentum going on a legislative side. We need to continue to use those agencies that are designed to support these Black businesses such as REBA, but also Common Cause. You have the Economic Progress Institute. There are so many ways in which our Black business community can use this opportunity to benefit them in a way that they've been unable to do in the past.
And I would just add to that, if we're talking about coalition building as part of that, right? Brown businesses, right, are also traditionally left out of the allocation of contracts and government spending, right? And so we need to, Black folks in the state, represent what, less than 10% of the population, right? We need to coalition build, right? We need, especially in the aftermath of George Floyd, we need to find, white allies, right, who want to be part of this coalition and recognize that fair treatment and access to contracts, access to capital, right, is beneficial not just to Black folks, but to the sustainability of our communities and our society. And that there are ramifications, if we continue on this path of inequities.
I definitely agree with Anthony and Melissa. We actually are really starting to discuss two important issues at hand: the distributional aspects of how the dollars are distributed from the state to the communities, plural, and who in those communities are preferenced. That's one particular issue. That's where we do need to build coalitions, bond together, pursue great public policy to sustain small businesses in Black and Brown communities. The second issue is, with that distribution, what is the return on investment to those dollars? And typically, what is lost are the distributional aspects that Anthony and Melissa are talking about. It's the focus usually is on, after the dollars are distributed, what return do we get? But if the dollars are distributed in a more equitable way, based on fair policies, preferencing areas with the greatest level of need in investment, I am sure we will be able to see differentiated outcomes.
I think we can't have a strategy that looks at the rising tide lifts all boats, because we know that that's not an equitable strategy as well too.
Mm-hmm.
We know that Black businesses were already already coming at it with a disadvantage. I noticed that Adriana also talked about, this is also the same community that also been doubly impacted by the pandemic as well too. And so, when we're looking at our education system, so families are really struggling, particularly in the Black and Brown communities. And so whatever we're thinking about invested, I would recommend or actually implore that you double and triple that investment in the Black community, because we need that. Because of the systemic racism that we've suffered at for generations. And so, whatever the supports that are needed, these institutional resources that have been provided thus far for the federal government haven't really looked at it from an equity lens. And so when you're looking at PPP loans, for example, it was based upon employee, but we know that, Black businesses, often have their micro businesses and often have a low number of employees. And so when you're looking at, using a formula that looks at employees, that wasn't distributed equitably. And so, yeah, some people might have got some change to cover maybe some rent and maybe some electricity. But, speaking from a first-hand example, that was not an equitable lens. And now we're looking at making sure that our main streets, where most of our businesses thrive, we're looking at Cranston Street, not looking at Broad Street. We should definitely invest in those corridors in our urban areas so that they are the thriving aspects of our community. So we have to invest in those areas in order for our country and our state to grow in an equitable manner.
So let's dive a little bit more deeply into some examples. And I think these examples are really useful for us to explore, both in terms of things that haven't worked, but also in terms of things that have. I wonder if Anthony or Melissa, maybe you'd like to talk about some examples either from the private sector or the public sector of examples that have worked, investing or partnering with Black businesses and watching and seeing them thrive.
Melissa, would you like to go first?
No, you can go ahead.
So, one of the things that we're seeing in the aftermath of George Floyd is a commitment on the part of some corporations in the private sector to give resources to Black and Brown businesses, right? And so a big portion of that, is right now feels like it was a one-time commitment, right? And I think what we have to really push for and understand is that we need a perpetual commitment on the part of corporations to help Black businesses, not just for the social benefit of society, but economically, right? This is an untapped market of businesses, right, that can contribute over $1 trillion to the economy if access to capital, access to contracts are made available for these businesses to grow and thrive, create jobs for people in the community, and add revenues, and guess what, add tax dollars to the overall economy. And so I think some corporations, based on the data, that it's now in their economic interest to do so, right? That, you know, several studies, like several McKinsey studies, have shown that, you know, more diverse businesses, right, whether that's, you know, at the board level or employee level, more diverse businesses outperform their peers from a financial performance standpoint. And so we're seeing more corporations really take to heart the economic benefits as well as the social benefits of committing to the Black and Latinx business market.
I think from the government side, you know, I'll talk about our office in a second, but from the government side, I think that what I've seen internally, in order for that structural racism kind of to be broken down, is really the government has to recognize that they're one of the biggest, they're one of the biggest entities that have very strong structural racist systems. And so they have to look at their hiring practices. They have to look at their leadership appointments. They have to look at how contracts are distributed amongst businesses, especially Black and brown businesses. They also have to look at eligibility requirements. So many of these processes and the eligibility requirements are so outside of the scope where our Black and brown communities and business leaders can even participate in some of these, the resources that are available. So I think those are some of the things that certainly need to be looked at from the perspective of government. And of course, you know, the amount of red tape, the lack of clarity in education and all of the processes when it comes to government. I think what we need to do is to create smart legislation to ensure, you know, equity and access and resources, and ensure that all of the folks that are drastically impacted are at the table to make these decisions on what that actually looks like on the ground. I mean, I think on our end, Secretary Gorbeyer has certainly mastered ensuring that the business community is at the table when we talk about what it looks like for legislation. We are constantly asking Black business owners, Hispanic business owners across the state of Rhode Island, what it looks like on the ground to be a business owner in the state of Rhode Island. And so we have made it a point to push smart legislation. We did the letter of good standing. There used to be a letter of good standing when you had to go to our office and the Division of Taxation to get two completely different letters of good standing, which made absolutely no sense. And so we consolidated that process, and now you only need to get a letter of good standing from our office. We've also put in annual report filing period alignment, where right now, in order for you to do your tax standing information with your accountant and then put it in your annual report to our office, they're totally different timelines for nonprofits versus an LLC. And so we put in smart legislation to consolidate and align those with the tax dates. You know, we're also making sure that with the nonprofits, we have so many nonprofits in the state of Rhode Island. We're making sure that we're able to allow for nonprofits in the state of Rhode Island to merge and do consolidations and conversions, which is not actually possible right now in our state. I think the other piece that is drastically missing that I saw a huge impact in the Black and brown community is education. We have so many small businesses that do not understand processes. I've had many young Black and Hispanic entrepreneurs come to our office who are completely distraught about the fact that their business partner has pulled out of their business and they don't know the intellectual property, who owns what. So we've created summits around intellectual property, about financial literacy for small businesses. And because we are a state agency, we are able to create all of these trainings for free to our community. And so we consistently ask the community to come to us with, what is it that you need from us that we can provide for free to break down some of those barriers and to help you to be successful from start to finish when it comes to your business.
Melissa, that was great. And boy, I must confess, I was not aware of the extensiveness of the services available through the Secretary of State's office. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing them.
There's so much more. So, if you want to have a chat, we can certainly do that.
Angie, I'd love to hear from your perspective as both a business owner and as a member of the not-for-profit community focusing on these issues. How do you think the community has tapped into the services that are available through the state of Rhode Island? And what more do you think could be done in terms of raising awareness and accessibility?
As a small business owner, it's often challenging. As I mentioned earlier, that most of the small business owner micro businesses, and there have been a number of opportunities you would love to take advantage of. But if you're asked to participate in a program that's 10 weeks long and you're the only employee, you need to close your business down for a number of weeks, it becomes a challenge. And so I think the best way, since Melissa talked very comprehensively about the resources that are available, but looking at ways to make it more accessible. I think our year we spent home last year and continue into this year has really allowed us to use technology in a new and innovative ways to make it more accessible. And so really looking at the digital platforms that we have available so that you may not necessarily need to close your business, but perhaps you can join, a call to learn about something in an hour, or really just, ensuring that whatever you're sharing with business owners, one is linguistically and culturally competent. I say that members of our community are entrepreneurial by spirit because oftentimes we need to be entrepreneurial to survive. And so really looking at ways in which members of the Black community can be entrepreneurial, but also follow the guidelines. Melissa talked about the deadlines, all those things oftentimes don't exist in other countries. My family's from West Africa, and you open a business, you set up a kiosk on a corner, that's it. You don't have to register the business, you don't have to submit all these things. And so all these things are nuances that I think need to be taken into consideration when you're thinking about developing resources for members of the community, and ensuring that whatever you're developing is not developed in a vacuum. I believe one of my colleagues on the panel shared that earlier. We have to ensure that whatever you're designing is also included the resources that members of the community need, right? And so if it's, QuickBooks, how to market your business, making sure that it's more digestible so that members of the community can use that as well too. And I think from nonprofits, I think it's, really different and depend on the size of the nonprofit, their focus area, what their needs are as well too. And so I think ensuring that the members of the nonprofit community are able to weigh in on what their resources, what supports that they need to survive and thrive and to be sustainable would be important as well.
Anthony Rust, I sense that you wanted to jump in. Were you going to say something from an investor's perspective?
No, I think I was just going to add to what Melissa said from the private sector standpoint, and offer up some real strategic ideas on how to help. And we're in the aftermath of George Floyd. Every corporation now is looking to have a DEI director, right? And so you see tons of searches out there for a DEI director, which is great, right? And we applaud that. But the very next focus for folks should be on trying to access jobs in the procurement office of these corporations, right? And trying to become the head of corporate procurement within the diversity office, because that's where the allocations and the dollars are flowing. And I highlighted the city of Boston as an example of, poor contracts, contracts not going to the Black community. Corporations are even worse than that, right? And so, strategically, I would, and it's the long game, right? Folks in the community need to think about trying to get folks placed in the corporate diversity supplier offices of corporations, because that's where the power is. As well as with, I can't speak to the state, but I'm speculating, state procurement offices are a key area too, to try and get folks of color in those positions.
I see a lot of agreement from panelists. Please feel free to jump in if you have comments.
Yeah, I only thing I want to add is, Anthony said that the, power is in making sure that people in the are in the key decision-making positions. And I want to, double down and reinforce that, they say if you're not at the seat at the table, you're on the plate getting served. And so making sure that you're not the only person of color in the room is critically important. Oftentimes there are decisions being made on behalf of community, not in partnership of the community. So I think it's critically important when we're talking about decision-making table that we have people in decision-making positions as well too in our state.
So I think that's a great segue for us to sort of pivot and talk a bit about how do we think about pipeline development for Black professionals. And we've talked a lot about how to support Black businesses, how to engender growth and in the Black business community. But, there are many young Black students graduating from high school who want to go and work in organizations across the state. We want to keep them in the state. There are lots of rising stars, professionals in organizations around the state. How should we be thinking about encouraging and giving advice to both Black professionals as they, ascend the ranks, and also to non-Black leaders in organizations to help thinking about creating this pipeline and creating opportunities so that, as Angie said, there is more diversity around the seats of power and around decision-making in the state.
Unfortunately, that typically is a longer road, but one that has the greatest returns. So students need to be well educated. They need to study hard so they can get into good colleges around this state. And if some choose to leave the state, we'll be sad, but we will welcome you back after you gain your education. Because we all know that citizens, particularly Black citizens, need more educational opportunities to be successful. With education, you tend to earn more money on average than those who don't have education. So get to college, get a degree, and in particular, get a degree in a field that is viable economically. That's one of the first steps. The second step is after you gain that education, and then that doesn't necessarily have to be a 4-year education. It can be a 2-year education into a subspecialty, a certificate program in a specific area as well. But even after you get that certificate, have continuous professional development, because the economic market is constantly changing. And just because you may have a set of skills that you earned when you first started in career, they may not sustain you for the entirety of a career, or as the economy changes, for the changes that may occur in the economy. Lifelong learning, continuous professional development, high levels of education will begin to be the baseline that sustains both individuals and agencies as they move forward through the economy.
I agree that education has to be central and accessible to people at all ages and points in their career. I'd love to hear others' perspectives on this.
I think the other piece, well, 2 other pieces. I agree wholeheartedly with Anthony on the lifelong learning, but I think especially for Black and Brown people, tapping into different networks is extremely important. And I also think that mentorship is huge. As a Black female professional. That was something that I certainly lacked in my career for many reasons. And I definitely realized how much more difficult it was for me. I also learned very quickly that I made a lot of mistakes in my process because I didn't really have anyone to kind of lean on and to talk through certain things. And so as someone who is a mentor of 6 young women of color, I know from just talking to these women that some of the wisdom and some of the insight that I have that I honestly think is not as impactful as it is, it really truly is to help them maneuver through some of the things that I maneuver through and totally failed. So I think mentoring is essential. And in Rhode Island, fortunately, we have a lot of organizations that provide that type of professional mentorship. You know, we have Sister Fire, which I think is one of the most incredible. Not only do they do mentorship, but they really hone in on social justice, and they really hone in on civic engagement and really empowering people to flex their civics muscles. So I say Sister Fire is certainly one of them. We have a Black Women's Association organization. There are several organizations that I think as Black and Brown people, we need to seek out so that you get that support and you get the ability to really get through these systems that are certainly not designed for us, but we do have to maneuver around them, under them, over them in order to be successful in our careers.
Angie, I think you're on, yeah, you're on mute.
Oh, not, I gotta get closer. I completely agree with Melissa and what Anthony said regarding education and how the incredible importance of mentorship. I wouldn't be where I am today without my mentor and her support of me. But I also, the only thing I would add to that is investing in Black businesses. It feels, I can't tell you how many people, Black people leave Rhode Island because they don't feel inspired by what they see around them, right? We moved to Maryland, we moved to Georgia, we moved to North Carolina, because when you walk into stores, you see Black owners, you see people who are doing well professionally in all areas, whether it be real estate, whether it be business. And so investing in Black businesses is a strategy to ensure that we help the next generation of leaders in the state of Rhode Island. People want to see others doing good around them. And oftentimes, it's inspiring. It's somebody you can reach out to. Hey, I want to start this business. Can you share your insight with me? But unfortunately, those opportunities have been limited in Rhode Island. And so oftentimes people draw to other states where there are a number of Black people who are doing well in businesses. And so, I say one of the paths is to ensure that we support and invest in Black businesses.
Angie, I think that's such a great point, and actually links to one of the questions that we've received from the audience about, a BIPOC focused accelerator in Rhode Island. We do have some fledgling accelerators, some that are more successful. What is the prospect of one that is focused on minority businesses? That's a question for anyone. Anthony, I know both Anthony's, and I'm sure Angie, you all have views.
Yeah, I certainly do. I mean, our program that we manage out of Massachusetts has an accelerator component, and we would certainly love to bring the program to Rhode Island. And obviously every state has its own unique characteristics and features. In Massachusetts, you've got, a larger number of Black owned businesses that have employees. And so I would say any accelerator program that's focused on Black businesses in Rhode Island really needs to focus on sole proprietors and how do we help sole proprietors grow, right? Because they have unique issues compared to businesses that have employees. And I think that sort of intentional and intensive focus it's labor intensive, but if we're really going to help Black and Brown Black businesses in Rhode Island, that segment of the Black community really needs to be a focus, and that accelerator needs to have a customized program to address their issues.
I don't necessarily want to add to that. I absolutely agree, Anthony. We see that often at the Secretary's office around sole proprietors. And if there is an opportunity for us to partner as a state agency to figure out how to better serve that particular group of people, please, I would absolutely love to have those conversations so we can move that forward.
Hey,
I absolutely agree as well. I was jotting my notes down saying that's a fantastic idea that I am willing to carry back to my two bosses, the provost and the president. I have never heard this as an idea to build an accelerator specifically for Black and brown businesses that are associated both with state agencies, nonprofit, and the higher education community. So I'm really excited about that idea.
To jump in, I think we should also look at urban ventures, right? Because the state actually created that organization with the premise of doing that, right? But it's been underfunded for many years. So although I think it's important to look at best practices from across the nation, right? I think we got to make sure that we don't get in front of ourselves to say, you know, let's bring stuff in from out of state. There are going to be a lot of building trust, knowing the community, all of that. So there has to be that level of investment in organizations that are here as well, right? Too often, organization comes into the state. We saw what happened with Goldman Sachs, right? Great program. However, one of the key criteria was businesses, their gross receipt needed to be $100,000, right? If you know anything about the micro business and small businesses within the state, looking at the census data, we know that many of them are not at that 100K threshold, right? So again, yes, it's a great program. However, again, it missed the entire Black community in many cases. So I think we have to be very careful as we think about designing programs that may have worked elsewhere outside of the state. And we have to really be intentional in the work that we're doing, that we don't skip over or ignore organizations that are here already. I think too often organizations that are here in the state were not invested in. You know, we talk a lot about buy local. Well, if you buy local, you should be also investing in local organizations, right? So they can scale and they can provide the services that are desperately needed in our state, right? So I'm going to, yes, I think it's important for collaboration and all of that, but we got to get to the point where we invest locally to scale organizations that are here right now, because we have the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Urban Venture, REBA, lots of other CWE and other groups here already. So I think we just got to be mindful that we're not pushing and supporting something from Boston or Connecticut or wherever and ignoring, you know, groups that are here already.
I agree. I agree, Lisa. I've certainly seen a similar theme when it comes to some of the organizations that have reached out to me and that have reached out to Secretary Gorbea. You know, we're in the process because the Rhode Island Builders Association has consistently seen a lack of ability for Black and brown contractors to be able to get bonded. And so we're in the process of creating an educational program for Hispanic and Black contractors to do surety bond readiness. And how do we start to work throughout the state system to kind of break down some of those processes that prevent Black and brown contractors from being able to become bonded and get larger contracts on the state side. We've also had small businesses that have come to us who have said, you know, I've owned this business for 50 years and my children don't want to take the business. How do I make this work where I can maintain and continue my legacy, but at the same time kind of walk away? So we're in the process of also creating a succession planning training for those businesses that have existed for 50, 60, 70 years, and they don't want to see their legacy fall because they can't pass it on to to their children. And so again, that all is happening because we're working with, yes, small businesses, but we're also working in partnership with those same agencies that, again, that designed in Rhode Island, know our communities, work with our communities. They know the challenges. We are working with those agencies to make this happen, to again ensure that our Black and Brown communities and businesses feel supported and that they feel like we genuinely have the ability to help them maintain their businesses that they have spent years creating.
Melissa, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I just want to make sure there aren't other views on this, really, really exciting topic. And we're seeing a number of comments in the chat of people agreeing that there needs to be more support of fledgling and, growing small businesses. There was one great question about, agreeing with a lot of what we've said, but how do we get the word out? How do we get the word out to the Black community and to the state at large in terms of these are the resources available, these are the things that we need to do in terms of procurement and mentoring and guiding people to prosperity and to economic success? Melissa, I can tell you want to jump in again. Please go ahead.
No, I'm actually just thinking about that question. It is very difficult. I think with the Black and Brown community, the concept of if you build it, they will come does not work. And I've seen that over and over again from the state side of, yes, we have all these fantastic tools. We have all of these fantastic programs. But when you look at the people who show up, they are not reflective of the Black and Brown community. And so much of my work has been literally calling people because I am clearly a member of the Black community. And therefore I take it on as my personal and professional responsibility to ensure that this work that we have created reaches those communities. So I do work, Lisa and I have talked many times about this. I work closely with Rhode. I also, like I said, work closely with many other organizations that are already plugged in, but I also have to come offline because some of our businesses are not plugged into these organizations. You have to get from behind the desk. You have to show up where they are. That is the only way that we can get our communities serviced in the way that they need. Me being behind the desk in my office is not going to make that happen. So we have to get into the community. We have to show up when there's ribbon cuttings for new Black businesses. That is our responsibility. If we are genuinely, honestly interested in the success of our Black and Brown businesses, that is the work that is absolutely necessary to communicate. It can't just be Facebook. It can't just be Twitter. We have to show up.
I think, Melissa, your comments are always so impassioned and articulate. Sometimes it's hard for others to follow you, but I encourage others to join the conversation. Anthony Roll, I'm going to put the spotlight on you for a moment. As a moonlighting statistician, tell us about the numbers and how do we make this work from a numbers perspective? Even at the heart of it, what Melissa and others are talking about is a change of behavior, and you have seen the underlying numbers. Tell us how we should be thinking about this.
Well, I didn't say anything after Melissa because everything she said was true. To sit and contemplate how to get information out is one of the most difficult things that any organization to do. Marketing, advertising is quite difficult, but particularly in communities of color and the Black community specifically, sometimes we may have to start somewhere, such as providing information to high school students so they carry it back to their parents. We may have to get into contact with Black churches and community groups to pass out that information. And all that involves time, as Melissa has said, and Angie too. That involves getting up from behind your desk, getting out to see the people. And in fact, I was smiling because Oscar Mejias, executive director for the Hispanic Chamber, when I was visiting with him, said, you just can't talk to folks who don't look like you. You have to get up and go. And recently he sent me an invitation to hear me give a presentation. And I said, well, great, this is the opportunity. Have to get up and go. And even though it was virtual, it was all in Spanish. And so I said, wow, that's another dimensionality that most folks don't consider. We also have to get the information out in English. We have to get it out in Spanish or some other language, so people who don't necessarily speak English as a first language at home still have opportunities to understand the information. And after they understand the information, be able to speak with people in the agency who speak their own language. That's what I was thinking about when Melissa was chatting.
Add to that is, unfortunately, we don't have a major Black, I'd say a question in there about, we do have a Black music, Providence American, and we don't have a Black radio station. Well, WBRU on Sundays. No, well, that's not considered. No. So we have BRU on Sundays. I'm not a big radio listener myself, but I say that we need one in Rhode Island. We do need a Black media outlet, number one. And number two, I say, particularly with the immigrant population, nothing travels faster on in terms of communication than something on WhatsApp. And WhatsApp, unless you're somebody who if you haven't traveled out the country, if you don't have people you're communicating with out of the country, then you don't have it. But if you're from any other country outside the United States, then you know what WhatsApp is. And if you send anything to anybody on WhatsApp, it's gonna go, right? Whether you're from India, whether you're from the Caribbean, whether you're from Africa, that stuff is free and people send stuff on WhatsApp. And so WhatsApp, I keep saying, is a untapped resource to sharing information in our community, because you get all kind of, misinformation and really good information as well too, right? And so I think that, while we don't have a major media outlet that we still need to, consider and bringing and having in Rhode Island, I also think that, utilizing the communication mechanisms that communities of color and Black people use traditionally is critically important.
Anthony, Rust, were you going to jump in there? Sorry.
I was going to say the intersectionality of the community is the way to get the word out, as Angie said, whether it's West African American community, whether it's Caribbean American community, there's that intersectionality of ethnicities that can communicate in its own way, as opposed to the mainstream communication techniques.
And success begets success. I loved the idea that was mentioned earlier that we need a PR agent. And imagine if the Providence Journal featured an exciting up and coming Black business, much like Lisa and her colleagues did on the Rhode website, of this amazing eyelash business that has gone from strength to strength during the pandemic. And now she's hiring people and offering all of these other aesthetic solutions. And we need more of that, because then people will lean in, people will go get their eyelashes done from this new business. And also then there'll be other young entrepreneurs who dare to try to be successful in their own way. So I want to go back to one of the earlier questions that came through, not to stop the conversation about entrepreneurialism and ideas, but there were a number of questions that related to where we think the $1.77 billion of funding coming to Rhode Island ought to be invested if we had control over making some of those decisions. And I'd like each person to talk a bit about the specific areas. Is it broadband? Is it education? Is it, as Anthony Roll said, plugging the gaps and filling in the potholes? So Anthony Roll, why don't you start with that?
Well, as the dean of a college of education, I'm going to say that a portion of that money needs to go to K-12 education, particularly K-12 accelerated education, because unfortunately many of our students are underserved and are underperforming. So they need additional support to get back and beyond grade level. But what also is important there is, and this is strange for a dean of a college of education to say, we also need to invest in viable job training opportunities for those students who may not want to go to college immediately. I know that when the plumber comes by my house, he or she charges me $125 an hour. Those are a special set of skills that are hard to come by and literally can help individuals build a lucrative business. And as they gain experience, those types of individuals then can start their own businesses back to the continuous professional development as well. So we need to make sure that we continue to invest in both short-term, midterm, and long-range educational, professional development opportunities, but also attempt to ensure that we're investing in those areas that actually have a viable space in the economy.
Anthony
I'm
Rust. Oh, sorry, Melissa, please.
I am going to agree with everything that everyone says, because I think we all know that it needs to be spread across. Angie talked about the investment needs to be double, tripled. I totally wholeheartedly agree with that. Education, absolutely, positively, skilling up, all those things are important. I think from my perspective, seeing small businesses on the ground, yes, there are a million things we should spend this money on. But what I think we should practically spend it on is there are a lot of small businesses that cannot afford accountants and attorneys. And so often they get trapped by, business solicitations that are false. They get trapped again into the intellectual property mess when they have multiple partners. They get trapped in their inability to be able to work with the Division of Taxation. They don't know what they're supposed to pay versus what they did pay. I mean, it is a trap. And we see it over and over and over again. I get hundreds of emails a month from small businesses who have no idea which state agency they're supposed to go to, what, the Division of Business Regulations, what licenses they need. It is so often that our small businesses are turned around because of these financial traps and their inability to secure attorneys and accountants. So I think that some of this money should certainly go to setting up our businesses to be able to get those services for free.
Yeah, good access to professional services for small business owners. Yeah, Angie, I see you leaning in. I'm sure you'd like to take advantage of some of those for your small businesses. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I completely agree with everything that Anthony and Melissa said. In addition to that, I think we all learned last year how important technology is in making sure that it's accessible. Even as a small business owner, a number of businesses, particularly those who were able to profit within the COVID epidemic, were able to quickly pivot and transition their business to being face-to-face into online. And so definitely investing in businesses, particularly Black businesses, on ensuring that access and, being able to do retail online is critically important. I think now that people have spent a year of online shopping, I don't think that behavior is going to change anytime soon. And so making sure, not only from an educational perspective, not from an intergenerational, from older adults who've spent the time home and isolated, I think just in general, we really need to look at the digital divide and making sure that it's accessible and free if possible. And anything, one of my, own passions is also housing. We realized with COVID-19 that one of the driving factors for risk factors was housing instability. And overcrowding in housing. So I think we really need to make sure that we really look at a cross sector of how we can make sure that everyone has safe, healthy, and affordable housing. Because without safe, healthy, and affordable housing, it's, from like a social work perspective, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't go to work, you can't keep a job, it impacts your education and it impacts your health outcomes. And so really looking at how we can resolve the issue with affordable housing and housing instability in Rhode Island, I think is critically important.
Right, thank you. Anthony, sorry, I invited you to join us and then cut you off.
No worries. I think whatever portion of that $1.7 trillion that goes to the private sector for the procurement of products, goods, and services needs to end up, a portion of that needs to end up in the hands of, Black businesses, and whether that's, filling a pothole and, the city of Cranston hires, contractors to do that. Some of those contractors need to be African-American, right? And some of that money, going to what Melissa said, needs to go to support the bonding of these Black contractors. right? Who tend to get left out because they don't have the bonding capacity for construction projects. Whether it's, the state is ordering paper, right? There should be some Black brokers, right? That supply office supplies that should be, found, identified, and included in the supply chain. So that's where I'd like to see a portion of that, that capital, especially the capital that, again, is going out to the private sector for the procurement of products, goods, or services.
We just got a question from the audience, and I think this person and I are on the same wavelength, because the question was, where do we go from here? And I was about to invite Lisa to tell us a bit about some of the programs and services and mentorship opportunities and entrepreneurial support programs that RIBA offers, because I think that that is going to be a very important part of the solution.
Yeah, so Robin, thank you so much. And oh my God, I am totally super excited about this conversation here, right? Specifically around how can we really engage and invest in Black businesses, right? How are we going to spend this money, right? And how are we going to ensure that we are at the table? Too often, we're not at the table, right? And we may invite, Angie said it right, you may have one person at the table and they expect they're going to speak for an entire community. It's not happening, right? So we got to get more people at the table. And I think, Anthony, Russ, you talked about supplier and diversity within corporate space. I can tell you, and lots of you out there on the call work in banks. I worked in 3 large banks, and I know for a fact their DEI program has absolutely nothing to do with supplier and diversity. They may think it is from the outside looking in, but when you're inside, you know for a fact that those entities, those groups are totally distinct, and they are not thinking about Black or brown people around supplier and diversity, because what they're saying, they're not at scale, they can't provide the volume that they need. And one of the things that we have been doing at RIBA is to talk to companies around, instead of these big packages, is to really separate these packages, right? So we talked about that supplier diversity, that onboarding, that engagement. Oh, we have a company in Cranston that does paper goods. We try to go to B of A, Bank of America. They said, we need you to support the entire footprint of Bank of America. It's not going to happen with a Black-owned business because they just don't have that capacity, right? But if you're able to break that contract down into smaller chunks, then a smaller firm would be able to participate, right? The same thing when you're talking about any other services throughout these industries. So Anthony, I know you mentioned around the commitment that some of these companies have made to date. I think a lot of it has been just very superficial, right? They put out these fancy letters, they hire one person, maybe a Black person, or they promote one person, and they said, here's what we've done, right? We are now on this journey, right? But until they really do a detailed audit of all of the processes, Melissa, you talked about earlier, right? To get at the root cause of these dysfunctional processes, or wait, let me correct that, processes that are actually designed to keep Black folks out, right? We know that they're not designed for us, they're designed to exclude us. And Anthony, you talked about education, yes. And I do agree with all of that, right? We got to do all the things in continuous learning, but let's be real, guys. There's a whole bunch of educated Black people in these places, and we're not being scaled and promoted, right? We know that. So we got to figure out, how do we bring these people to the table around collaboration, conversation around, here's what we're spending from our spending power perspective. We're an on-tap market that you need to seize. And if not, here's what we're going to take our money elsewhere, right? So we got to do that. So a couple of things about the Rhode Island Black Business Association. We have several programs. Let me just say, over the last 10 years, we have been undercapitalized. Straight up, right? Black businesses, Black organization, Black-led organization have not been funded at the level that they should. There's tons of other organizations out there. Melissa talks about the poverty traps. Tons of organization out there that are keeping people trapped. Here's a bag of food because we need to feed the kids today, but they're going to come back next week for that same bag of food. What we need to move for is more around creating jobs through stronger Black businesses to be able to empower families. So we're doing that on a small scale. Rhode Island Black Business Association need all of us on this line to lean in and to support this work that we're doing. Over the last 10 years, we've been working on a very shoestring budget, right? We got to get the entire community to lean in, to understand business development is for all of us, right? It means that we're going to lift our community forward. So Melissa, you talked a lot about mentorship. I will take it a step further and say sponsorship is very important as well, right? Rhode Island Black Business Association, we kicked off a really great mentorship program currently in partnership with Johnson and Wales, and we're looking to take it across the state to other universities and colleges, 18 through 30. There is a huge need right now for mentors, Black mentors. You all need to sign up. We have about 40 something people in our program right now. We're going to kick off another one later this fall. We need more Black professionals to sign up and support this program. In addition to the mentorship program for the young adults, there is a great need for professional. Black women are reaching out to us, Black men are reaching out to us, 48, 38, 50, wants to be a part of our program, but it's not designed for them. So we need to think about that. They'll say, we go over here and they don't want us over there, right? We go to this program and we don't feel like we belong, right? That's very important. So we gotta be able to support our own organization. In addition to mentorship, we have financial literacy. We just launched or established a really great mentorship program in financial literacy with Bank of America. They're going to support us with financial literacy, not just for individuals, but also for businesses, which is great. In addition, we have the business mentorship. We're looking for mentors. So you all need to sign up if you got great talent. Anthony, Angie, Melissa, all of you guys, you need to sign up, tell your mom and your friends and everybody, lean in, support the work that we're doing. And then of course, the technical assistant and a micro loan program that we've been doing since 2015. One of the really unique thing about the micro program that we did in the collateral support program, what we did not want is for business owners to pledge their homes as collateral. As an organization, REBA, we pledged 30% on behalf of the business owners because we did not want them to put their home at risk. We want that asset to remain within our community. So we, the organization, in partnership with the City of Providence, we were able to provide the collateral for companies if they're going for $75,000 or $50,000, we pledge 30% on their behalf, right? Home ownership is very important. We want that funds to pass over generation to generation. So we want to make sure that we don't, impact that home ownership, right? And then we have the emergency fund, which is $5,000 to $10,000. We're in this business that we don't want people, especially our businesses right now, to go into any more loans. So we're advocating right now for grants. So if you are rich and you're on this call, you have a lot of money, we have a grant program that is underfunded. We need some money in that so we can give out loans, right? Or sorry, correction, give out grants. Too much loans, our businesses are tapped out with loans. We need grants. And then lastly, I'm going to encourage all of you, if you're not yet a member of the Rhode Island Black Business Association, we are open to the public. Everybody can join. Membership starts at $150 and it goes all the way up to like a corporate membership at 10 grand. If you are not yet a member, by the time you leave this here, the next 30 minutes from now, you should sign up, right? Membership is very, very critically important. You are not only supporting us as an organization, you're supporting about job creation. When folks are working, guess what? Crime goes down, unemployment goes down. We pay into the tax roll. It's a win-win across the board. So we encourage you to join, pay your membership. And please remember, if you have a business, you can write it off. Right? If you're a business owner, you can write off your membership. But what's really unique about your membership, you get to be a part of the decision-making role, right? If you're a member, you are a part of this organization. We want you to come in and take advantage of it. And in addition to that, we are recruiting for lots of volunteer opportunities. Guess what? If you look at our website and you don't see something that that we have designed or we have out there for you, you can come and tell us what you would like to do. For example, we have an attorney that just reached out and says, I want to do a networking event for young individuals, right? And we just put that on the calendar. He's now going to do that. And then he followed up and said, oh, by the way, I want to be on your board as well. So that's great. So if you are thinking about something, you're good at something, and you want to do something for the Black community, help us spread the word about all of these amazing services that REBA has to offer. Too many of us are keeping REBA as a secret. Let's put it out there. This organization belongs to all of us, and we got to own it. We got to step up and help us. And as Melissa, you said on another meeting, right? When Black folks mess up, you all get at us, right? You come at us really charging, right? And we don't get a second chance to correct anything. And you all need to figure out, how can I be helpful? But give us a little break. And Melissa, I know I butchered that, but you said it so well last time, right? You guys got to be there and support us, because we are going to win this battle together. My sister and I talked a lot every morning, and we're the only set of people that go to sleep fighting and wake up fighting. People heads are nodding. Am I the only one that is like seeing something on Twitter or wherever where Black folks are being mistreated and we're getting all worked up before we go to bed? And then we wake up first thing in the morning, we're all upset again? Yeah, all right. So we're in this together. I encourage you all to sign up, lean in, and I get excited. I'm Jamaican, so you know that's just how the island roll.
Lisa,
So,
that's great, and thank you so much for gathering us. Before we let people go and get on with their evening, do any of our incredible panelists have final comments, pieces of advice, or closing remarks that they would like to add in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I want to say thanks, Lisa, for having us. We appreciate contributing to tonight's event. I will say on the corporation side that one of the ways several of us in the investment community are holding corporations accountable for their next actions, and which folks on this call can do as well, is through your investments, right? And so I chair the Small Endowment Fund in North Carolina. I chair the investment committee, and we have called on all of our investment managers that manage money for us to adopt racial equity criteria into their investment practices and their investment decisions before they pick a stock or a bond, right? And so the way we plan to hold corporations accountable is through our investment dollars. And the state of Rhode Island's pension fund, which several folks may have contributed to, or the city of Providence's pension fund, are two ways that local folks can hold corporations accountable to follow through with their commitments, right? And through the management of those funds, those pension funds can divest of those businesses if they don't like or meet the interest of folks in the community.
Thanks so much for that, Anthony. Any other final comments?
I will add, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is to invest in Black business. We are here in Rhode Island. Look for them. There's a website called Black Lives Biz that has a list of Black businesses, mainly Rhode Island, but also branching out to Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And as people who are frequent, not only in the community, but also ask yourselves, what organizations that you work for, how is your organization investing in Black businesses? Look at the vendor list that you have within your respective organizations, and how are you supporting Black businesses? The only way that Black businesses are going to thrive in the state of Rhode Island is if we invest in Black businesses. And so I implore you to think about your day, and as you go about your day, whether it be a coffee shop, whether it be a real estate agent, whether it be a builder, you know, there are Black entrepreneurs in almost every sector. And so make sure that you be intentional about your investment in Black businesses. If you think that Black lives matter, make sure you also invest in Black lives as well, in Black businesses.
Angie, that's really well put. Thank you all so much, and thank you for the link. I think Amanda also put that in the chat. That was actually one of the questions that came into me privately. Is there a list of Black-owned businesses for people to support? With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for bringing us together, and I'll let you close things out.
Hey, Robin, you all give it up for Robin. Great job. Thank you so much. And to all of the panelists, thank you guys to spend almost 90 minutes with us today. The conversation has been rich. We have recorded this. We'll be sharing it out, but there's a lot of takeaways from tonight's conversation. More to come. Again, as we mentioned earlier, this is a series, right? We're going to be hosting these throughout the year and beyond. We encourage you to watch this space. If there are people out there that you think should be a part of the next coming discussion, please let us know. And we encourage you to support. Angie, you said it so many times. We got to support Black businesses, right? But again, to all of you that took the time to join us to watch and listen to this, we thank you for being here. We hope that you stay in touch. Again, I don't want to just keep rambling and talking, so I'm going to say thank you guys for being here. We appreciate it. Big up yourself on the lodge. Take care. God bless you all. I appreciate you and I love you. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us.